Hey guys, welcome back. I am bringing to you today a list of the top 15 or so dungeons of the decade. I spent all of 15 minutes compiling this list, so I hope you appreciate it as much as I do. No, but for real, my wife and I are doing this whole, December video thing, and we've come up with a few ideas, and something that I'm known for on my channel and something that I just adore doing is running dungeons and PvEing in World of Warcraft. Raiding, dungeoning, whatever. But this list today is all about the dungeons, and I think I've picked out a few typical, like, hey, I love this dungeon, and a few dungeons that may make you scratch your head wondering why the heck did you choose that one as one of your favorite dungeons of the decade. Well, don't worry, I'll get into it. Now, since this is for the past decade, this does not encompass the entire game, keep in mind. So, without further ado, let's just jump right on into it. Up first, we have Cataclysm, okay? I know I could include the last few months of Wrath of the Lich King. Actually, if I'm not mistaken, Cataclysm came out in December 2010, so I could probably include like the last 11, 12 months of Wrath. But I chose to start in Cataclysm. Although, how about that Oculus dungeon? No, I'm just kidding. That's probably the worst one ever made. Or thereabouts. But nevertheless, we're going to jump right into Cataclysm. And my first dungeon on the list, this is not in any particular order, by the way. I'm just going in era or by expansion. So I'm not ranking these from number 15 up to number 1. But my first dungeon that I'm going to talk about is Black Rock Caverns. Oh my goodness. For whatever reason, the Cataclysm dungeons for me wound up being some of my favorite dungeons of all time. And this became more evident, or I became more aware of it, when Time Walking came out for Cataclysm, I don't know, X years ago. And going through this list and going through the dungeons, the dungeon journal in game, running them to capture footage for this video, it reminded me just how much I appreciate Cataclysm dungeons. In Black Rock Caverns, for whatever reason, you zone in, there's slag, there's lava, you're in Black Rock Mountain, one of the pillars of World of Warcraft. Oh my goodness, man. I love the giant orc dude. I don't remember his name. It's been a few years. I probably should know his name because I captured footage of this yesterday. But you got the giant orc dude. He's flailing about wildly as you go through the dungeon, helping you clear those bridges, the trash in those bridges. And you encounter these bosses. You have an ogre boss, which, again, ogres, classic WoW experience. Hello, they've been around since Warcraft 1. You go to, you go through the dungeon, you kill a caster. Everyone hates casters, right? Am I right? Maybe not everyone. But you go deeper and deeper and deeper into the cavern, and you wind up just fighting this core hound, Beauty, I can't remember her name. Again, you'd think I'd be more prepared for these videos, but I'm not. And I love the experience of just delving into Black Rock Mountain, in this case, a cavern within Black Rock Mountain. It just wound up being so much fun. I love the aesthetic, I love the environment, and spoiler alert, you're gonna hear me use these keywords: aesthetic, the environment, the aura of this dungeon. You're gonna hear me talk about this all the time because it all means the same to me, so whatever. But Black Rock Caverns, I love that dungeon, man. For whatever reason, when Cataclysm launched, and even though Cataclysm is not considered the greatest expansion of all time, and I don't consider it the greatest expansion of all time, but I thoroughly enjoy the majority of Cataclysm dungeons. The next dungeon up, and again, some of these might throw you guys for a loop, Halls of Origination. Now, Brutal, why is H-O-O, one of your favorite dungeons? I love the absolute volume of this dungeon. The wings. I love the fact that there is... I don't want to say there's so much to do in the dungeon, because there's not so much to do. But you zone in, and you have that Egyptian architecture. And by the way, this dungeon, along with the next one on my list, spoiler alert again, is in my favorite zone of all time. Uldum. Ooh. I cannot emphasize to you guys enough. I'm getting a little off topic here, so excuse me. I love the zone Oldham. Oldham? I've always called it Oldham. Doesn't matter. Who cares? You know what I'm talking about. Oldham is my favorite zone of all. The look, the feel of Oldham. I love it, man. And the fact that we're coming back to it in patch 8.3, but that's a whole other story. So I'm not even going to get into that. But Halls of Origination, you zone in, and you have a variety of wings you can go down, like 2. You get an event on the left with Bronzebeard. You get to go kill Lord Marigar's cousin on the right. You go up an elevator. I mean, who doesn't love elevators? Elevators are one of the key components of World of Warcraft. You go upstairs. You kill. I think it's like 4 bosses upstairs, just back to back to back to back. It's awesome, man. And every boss, of course, has the environment, like the actual room. I think is the same, but they're all like one's green and one's purple. But I love Halls of Origination, similar to Halls of Stone, Halls of Lightning, and Wrath. I love those halls dungeons because you just zone in and you know you're in for, I don't want to say this grandiose experience, but you're in for a dungeon. You know what you're getting into. And like I said a second ago, the other dungeon that I really appreciated and enjoyed in Cataclysm was the Lost City of Tol'vir. Again, very similar to the architecture in this dungeon. And caveat, I think my opinion on this dungeon is biased just a little bit due to the fact that it was a few years ago, when the Infinite Time Reaver was first announced and everyone and their mom was grinding it in time-walking dungeons, the second boss, the crocodile, what's that little guy? Onk? It's not a shaman ability, but there's that little guy, I think it's the second boss, the one off to the left. He dropped my Infinite Time Reaver. And Coltrane was with me nonetheless. I have a clip of it on my Twitch channel, so come check it out whenever you want. Nevertheless, I love this dungeon because you just get to go through and you're dealing with a variety of bosses. And I love the open air of the dungeon. I love the ambiance and the experience. And again, the Egyptian architecture, the NPCs. Oh man, this is of course, this era and most of these eras that occurred in the 2010s over the past decade, they were long before Mythic Plus. So none of these dungeons were oriented. They were not designed for Mythic Plus. These dungeons were not even designed for challenge modes. They were just dungeons that you ran for the fun of it at the beginning of the expansion. I don't even remember if they were relevant at the end of the expansion. This is 8-10 years ago, so I just remember really enjoying them. And again, time walking and so on and so forth. Moving on to Mists of Pandaria, however, I am thrilled to say that none of them really stood out to me over the course of time. I loved Mop. Most people look back on Mists of Pandaria and they love reminiscing about Mists of Pandaria and the zones and the experience of introducing a new class and so many new NPCs and Throne of Thunder, and we'll get to that in another video. But when it comes to the dungeons, none of the dungeons in Mists of Pandaria really did anything for me personally. So we're actually gonna bypass Mist. We're gonna just kind of speed right on through Mists of Pandaria. I'm not saying the dungeons were terrible. I'm not saying that I loathed the experience. But for me, the dungeons in Mop don't hold a candle, don't hold a flame, whatever the phrase is, to Cataclysm dungeons, Legion dungeons, or in the case of what we're talking about now, Warlords of Draenor. I look at WoD dungeons in a similar way that I look at Cataclysm dungeons. I really like them. I know Warlords of Draenor gets pooped on quite a bit. WoD was not the greatest experience for players due to the ginormous lack of content for the most part. And due to the fact that some of the systems didn't really pan out the way that Blizzard wanted to, or they just weren't introduced at all. But again, I'm trying not to make this video about more than the dungeons. So let's get back to the dungeons here. In no particular order, let's talk about the Grim Rail Depot. Holy cow, talk about a unique dungeon. You zone in, you kill a few guys, you deal with the first boss, which is a twofer. I think it's is it a goblin and a big orc? I don't know. It's a little guy and a big guy. You murder them. You go up a flight of stairs. I think it's really more like ramps. You dodge some fire being thrown at you. And then I think you jump on that's when you jump on the train, right? Doesn't matter. You eventually get on a train. And what's cool is out in the world, you can see the Grimrail Depot. There's actually an area of the Gorgrond, I believe it is, called the Grimrail Depot, and you can see like the tracks and everything. It's really, really cool. But I love the fact that, you know, as you're on the train, like in the dungeon, you're on this train and you see the environment, you see the world zipping by. And I think the way that Blizzard showcased this at BlizzCon one year is, you know, you're stationary, of course, like the actual train stationary, and they have the world, or, you know, the art, the walls, the actual outside area on a track zooming by you. So you're stationary, but the world looks like it looks like you're moving, and it's whatever. I'm sure I explained that really poorly, but the Grimrail Depot wound up being a really fun dungeon just because of where it was set and how it was set up. Now, similarly, you go to the Iron Docks, and holy cow, man, there's nothing fancy about the zone, there's nothing fancy about the fights, but one of the reasons why the Iron Docks stood out to me as a player was the actual RP of the end boss or end bosses in that dungeon. Good idea, sir. I didn't mean the cat. Like, you know, put a muzzle on it. You hear these guys talking to you, talking to each other through the whole dungeon. And the end boss and his lackey are going back and forth about, oh, these heroes are here and they're going to kill us and they're killing all of our men and all of our bosses. And, you know, the end boss is arrogant and he's like, oh, it's not a big deal. Who cares? And you get to him and you murder him, and it's a hootenanny the whole way through. And you get to control a couple of giant iron stars. Those are always fun, I guess. And just hearing the voice acting in that zone really cemented it as one of my favorite experiences in Warlords of Draenor Dungeons. And by the way, you'll notice I'm not really talking about challenge modes too much. I didn't really focus on challenge modes when I was playing through MoP and through WoD. I just didn't really care. Of course, now I'm sad that I don't have the weapon transmogs from WoD and the armor transmogs from MoP, but we're not going to talk about that. I'm just talking about the heart and soul of each dungeon. The dungeon that is on my list after Iron Docks is Skyreach of all dungeons. Now, I know Skyreach wasn't necessarily the most fun dungeon for everyone to run, but again, from an artistic standpoint, from, you know, you zone in, you spin, you waste like a minute flying in on this stupid giant raven, whatever, and you land and you start clearing to the first boss, and I love the colors, I love the environment, I love the fact that you're not in the sky per se, because I think you're on platforms that are attached to the side of a mountain, if I'm not mistaken. So you're not just hovering in the middle of the sky, you're not on clouds, but you can just look around. You can look out across, you know, the landscape of Spires of a Rock, I think is what the zone is called. And it's a beautiful setting. And it was one of those dungeons to where I did not hate doing it. And I looked forward. I looked forward to going in there and just appreciating what the art team had made, what the PvE team had made. And I tell you what, man, there's that one gauntlet area to where you're running through and you're pushing against the wind, and these little ravens or whatever come and peck at you the whole time. I'm telling you, man, heroic leap, baby, and burning rush to a degree. I was playing my warrior, my brewmaster monk, my moonkin, my hunter, and my warlock for the most part during that expansion. So I got to utilize a lot of movement in that dungeon, which was really fun. Honorable mention, Upper Blackrock Spire. Again, Blackrock Mountain, you can't go wrong. But that's just an honorable mention. Moving on to the Mythic Plus era, this time starting, of course, with Legion, because we're going in order, you know, from one expansion to another. Legion is looked back on as the highlight of dungeons, the era that shines brightest for those who enjoy delving into dungeons. When Blizzard made Mythic Plus, so let me back up a step. In Legion, Mythic Plus was designed around the dungeons. In BFA, dungeons were designed around Mythic Plus. So that may not make a lot of sense to a lot of people, but if you've run as many Mythic Plus dungeons as I've run, or as a ton, I mean, there are people, of course, that have run way more dungeons than I have in Legion and BFA. There are people that have a much higher, I think my warrior's currently 2.3k. This is season 3 I'm talking about. So my Raider.io is okay. It's decent enough. I'm doing like 19s and 20s right now. So I think I have a pretty firm understanding of dungeons in BFA, and I believe you can fact check this on my Raider.io on my Warlock Brule Dan. I believe I got to 4k in Legion. Scores are a little different between expansions. The reason why I'm bragging about my score isn't to brag, but it's to give you perspective that I ran a lot of dungeons in Legion, and I've run a lot of dungeons in BFA. It's just my thing. I like, outside of raid time, you can usually find me in the Mythic Plus. I just love the experience, for better or for worse. But there's no denying that it's a very different experience. Legion dungeons and BFA dungeons are very different, and that's on purpose. It's by design. But in Legion, because Mythic Plus was designed around the dungeons, a lot of people look at that as a better experience. They look back on Legion dungeons and they think to themselves, you know what, I enjoyed this more because trash layouts were different, percentages were counted differently, boss fights were more engaging, less punishing, whatever the case may be. Now, I know I said it toward the beginning of this video, which I'm sure is like 20 minutes long at this point in time, so get over it. But at the beginning of this video, I said something along the lines of, I'm not ranking these in order. I'm not going from number 15 all the way up to number 1, but I can definitively say without a shadow of a doubt, Court of Stars is one of my favorite dungeons, if not my favorite dungeon of all time. I can't really tell you why. I loved picking up, well, I guess I can. I loved picking up the buffs. I loved finding the hidden element in the masquerade ball area toward the end of the dungeon. I love the boss fights. For whatever, and everyone has those dungeons, for themselves. Like, those of you who are watching this video, there are some of you out there that hate Court of Stars. You're wrong, but you can think however you want to think. You can feel however you want to feel. I can't really do anything about it, but for me, God, man, I loved Court of Stars. There was just something about that dungeon, the things I've already mentioned and more, that just spoke to me. I loved running it. I loved being in there. It was just an absolute blast. If I had to complain about one thing, it was the little gondola. Is that what it's called? The little boat ride at the beginning. That was lame. Wasting time in a dungeon. I know it's counted into the Mythic Plus timer, but it's a waste of time. Nevertheless, the next dungeon I have on my list is Eye of Azara. Eye of Azara, to me, just the outdoor zone, the seagulls, being able to do that skip, and you could bypass the giant cave by going up in the boat and doing that skip. You used to be, at the beginning of the dungeon, you used to be able to glide in, and that's why Blizzard nerfed gliders for Mythic Plus dungeons, is because of Eye of Azara. There were so many little tricks and so many little interesting tidbits about that zone. And the last boss fight, as frustrating as it could be, I love the fact that you started an execute phase. Hello! Those fights are amazing, man. Just bring execute classes. God. Eye of Azara, to me, was just an absolute blast. But those seagulls. Ooh, those seagulls. The Arcway. Kind of like if Court of Stars is on one hand, then to me Arcway's on the other. It's the yin and the yang, you know what I mean? It's a little push and pull, a little give and take. I was playing Warlock in Legion for the most part, and Arcway was awesome. I got to mind control a demon, or whatever spell that's called, enslave a demon, and I could just buff the crap out of my haste, I think is what it was back in the day. And sprawling dungeons are hit or miss for me, but Arcway was a huge hit for me. I love the Arcway. The final boss, again, I mentioned voice acting earlier in the video. I love voice acting, as I'm sure most of us do. And every once in a while, you encounter a boss, or you encounter a scenario, or whatever it is, and the voice actor, the writing, everything just lines up. And that last boss, vermin, wait, no, that's not it. Fall to a swarm of rats, or whatever his phrasing is. I can't think of it right now because I'm just flapping my lips here, but the last boss was so much fun to deal with. I didn't necessarily like the whole him teleporting us across the zone and having to run back to him thing. That was kind of lame in and of itself, but I won't count that against the entirety of the dungeon. Just being able to go in and enjoy this sprawling dungeon with great voice acting and being able to take advantage of things as a Warlock made that dungeon one of my favorites. I vividly remember getting into this one group and us having, I think, 50 plus deaths before the timer ran out. That wasn't fun. But other than that, it was a great dungeon. And I have to include Vault of the Wardens. There are times where I love being in those outdoor zones like Eye of Azara or in those colorful zones like Skyreach. But Vault of the Wardens was so cool because, again, much like I said at the beginning of this dungeon, just delving deeper and deeper and deeper into an experience. Just, I love that setting. You go into Vault of the Wardens and you just lay waste to trash. You get to that first boss, you smack him around a little bit. You're going down an elevator after dealing with some demons and so on and so forth. Vault of the Wardens, I always look forward to running Vault of the Wardens. Even at the end, like, you know, when you're dealing with the spiders and having to get around them and dealing with Cordana, I think is the final boss's name. I think it's Cordana, whatever. No one cares about her anymore. She's a terrible person, a betrayer, but not like Illidan. She's not that kind of betrayer. Nevertheless, we're getting off topic. Legion is considered to be some of the best dungeons ever made, and there's a good reason too. Last but not least, we have Battle for Azeroth. 30 minutes later, here we are at the end of the video. Battle for Azeroth. Now, again, I've stated a few minutes ago that I do enjoy running Mythic Plus, very much so. And yes, I consider Legion dungeons to probably be better than Battle for Azeroth dungeons for a variety of reasons. But I can still appreciate some of these BFA dungeons. And they are, you know, the current iteration of dungeons we're dealing with. So for me, I like to stay sharp. I like to be in there. I like to learn new things. And I think it's really important, caveat once again, every time you run a dungeon, you look for something new to learn. And it's just one of those things to where I'm always looking to improve. I'm always looking to get better at what I do, to hone my craft. But Battle for Azeroth dungeons, again, in no particular order. Atal Dazar, man, I love that zone. It's short, it's sweet. Boss fights are relatively easy and straightforward until you run Razan the wrong way, you noobs. Go watch my 3 things not to do with Razan video. It ain't hard. Quit being bad. Yasma at the end, she can be kind of frustrating with all those stupid spiders and people not knowing how to stay off of them. Stop dying. But no, you know, just being able to snap. I'm currently playing my Prot Warrior again, so I'm able to snap those little swords onto various places. I have a variety of CC as a warrior, interrupts, stuns, fears, etc. Just being able to maintain control of various mobs. There's a lot of casters in BFA dungeons, of course. But Atal Dazar, like I said, short, sweet. You get in, you get out in 30 minutes or less, hopefully. Just a great experience for me. And Razan, the story of Razan, of course, is so sad. You go through the leveling experience, and Razan's this larger-than-life character, and then he's murdered. So you get to deal with Razan and put him down week after week after week, and it's just a ton of fun for me. King's Rest. Now, I know at the beginning of the video, some of you said some of you might not agree with these assessments. That's cool, man. Whatever. But King's Rest, to me, it's one of those dungeons to where I don't thoroughly love running it on Mythic Plus because those bosses can be tough. Those, you know, pretty much every boss in that dungeon is tough, especially on Tyrannical. But I'm trying to take into consideration the entirety of the dungeon and not just the Mythic Plus experience in the context of Legion and BFA. Because with King's Rest, again, you're going into a tomb. You get to see and experience and interact with kings of the past, kings of Dalazar from yesteryear. You're literally fighting mummies and zombies and ghosts or whatever they are. Undead raptors and such. Shadow of Zul, literally the last NPC, not counting beguiling NPCs, is bypassable nowadays. People know how to skip him, and as a Prot Warrior, let me tell you how much I appreciate that. Shadow of Zul is not an easy thing to tank on your higher keys, your 19s, your 20s, your 21s. Not an easy boss to tank. Holy crap, he hits like... Well, he hits like nothing else in the game. It's unreal. But even though it's not the most fun thing I've ever run on Mythic Plus, I love just how the dungeon unfolds and what you get to experience and interact, and who you get to interact with. And for me, it's a lot of fun. In the grand scheme of things, it's a lot of fun. My favorite dungeon of BFA, however, the Underworld. Oh boy! Listen, much like Court of Stars, I don't know why. There's nothing unique about it per se, But there's just, for some reason, the Underrot, I zone into that place and I get excited. I get ready to go. It's just it's my jam, man. I love the Underrot. You get to murder everything in your path. And oftentimes you get to see your teammates get murdered too when they get stun locked by the flower dudes, the dread lashes, whatever they're called. Of course, the blood swarm bat larva things, they get to murder people all the time, and then they lock and they fixate on them. But I tell you what, dude, as a protection, as a tank, I guess, as a whole, that second boss, you can just completely avoid his regurgitation ability, whatever the heck that's called. First boss is fun because you just blitz and murder her. Fourth boss, as long as your tank knows what he's doing, is a breeze. And again, with the Prot Warrior, you thunderclap. You never have to worry about those little spore pods. Third boss can be tough if you're not careful. People love to screw up upheavals, so please get good at that. But for whatever reason, from beginning to middle to end, that dungeon just does it for me. Again, the environment of the dungeon, just looking up and seeing this corrupted, just infected area. You know, I think you're in the midst of a Titan facility, if I'm not mistaken, and there's just mold everywhere, basically, and it just looks so cool. It feels like you don't want to be there. It feels like you just need to burn this place to the ground, and to me, it's a blast. And last but not least, I think a dungeon that a lot of people appreciate, even if they don't have the greatest success in there, is Waycrest Manor. I've said again and again and again through this video that the voice acting, the RP, the story, the whatever, man, Waycrest Manor just seals it for me. It cements it as one of my favorite dungeons of BFA. You zone in, and it's not a huge dungeon, right? You're in a manor, a mansion, whatever you want, Waycrest Manor. You can call it whatever you want to call it, but you zone in, and you're just dealing with these tight quarters, which is frustrating when you're dealing with Sanguine and stuff. But again, looking beyond and looking past Mythic Plus, you're just dealing with this swarm of NPCs. This place is absolutely packed with, corrupted NPCs. Not Gahoon corruption, not Old God corruption, but it's just, this place is infected. It is infested. Harken back to Season 1. And you're just slaying stuff left and right. Stinking ghosts here and weird pig people there. It's crazy, man. Second boss, well, I guess I shouldn't say so. Well, I guess I could say second boss, but tree boss is nuts. I love being able to tank that guy without putting him in fire. Witches are crazy. Spell reflection for the win. Holy cow. Thank God for spell reflection. The two bosses in the bottom. The final boss is super easy, in my opinion. Fourth boss is wild and crazy. Again, spell reflection for the win. But just being able to get into the manor, absolutely destroy everything in there, heading down to the cellar, the basement, the whatever you want to call it. It's a ton of fun. But again, it's all about that aesthetic. The voice acting is on point. Oh, look, husband. It's just, oh, man. I love it. Anyway, this has been my, in no particular order, top dungeons of the decade. You can look forward to top raids of the decade here in the near future and plenty of other videos. Make sure you follow me on Twitch, Instagram, Twitter. My wife has been killing it on keeping all of my stuff updated and relevant, and she's been communicating amazingly well with you guys, the audience, the fan base, and I hope you appreciate all of her hard work and what little work I've been doing. My name's Brutal. I'll see you guys in the next video.